I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations, a new season. Elie Honig is with us. Elie Honig is a top lawyer, a former federal prosecutor, a news analyst for CNN, and he has written a dynamite new book called Hatchet Man. It is an account of the stewardship of the Justice Department under former Attorney General Bill Barr. We're pleased to welcome Elie Honig to the program. Hi, Elie.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm delighted to have you, and congratulations on your book. I really couldn't put it down. Hatchet Man, How Bill Barr Broke the Prosecutors Code and Corrupted the Justice Department is the subtitle. It's very intriguing, very engaging, and it's a must-read for every would-be prosecutor. It's almost a handbook.
Thanks, Jim. Well, what I tried to do in the book, as you saw, was, yes, it's largely a critique of Bill Barr and his performance as Attorney General over his 2 years in office, but I also weave in a lot of my own prosecutor stories from the courtroom, from trials, from investigations, because A, I think it's just entertaining. People like to know what really happens behind the scenes at DOJ, but B, it also sort of illuminates certain important principles that I draw out throughout the book that I argue that Bill Barr violated with his abuse of power as Attorney General.
Now, a hatchet man is usually thought of as someone who's employed to commit some bad act. You think that fits Bill Barr appropriately?
I do. And I argue in the book that Bill Barr really sort of carried out those bad acts in a couple ways. Look, virtually everything Bill Barr did throughout his administration was politically tinged, was designed to protect Donald Trump, to promote whatever Donald Trump's political talking point of the moment was. Everything from the Mueller report on through the sort of big lie of election fraud and many chapters in between. The other thing that Bill Barr did that I think really sets him apart and really sort of made him a disgrace as an attorney general is that he lied constantly. And in the book, Jim, I call Bill Barr a liar. I use that, what I consider to be very strong four-letter word. Both fields where I've worked, the law and now media, you are, I think, naturally hesitant to call somebody a liar. We like to say it more polite ways. But as I was going through the book and just came across lie after lie after lie, I said, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. And by the way, I'm not alone. In the book, I quote multiple federal judges who essentially any synonym you can think of for liar say he was disingenuous and inconsistent with the truth and not credible and lack candor. Not fine. That's the nice judicial way to say it, but I'm going to say it my way, which is I believe he lied over and over again. So yeah, I think it's fair to call him a hatchet man.
Was Barr corrupt? I mean, that's part of, you use the word corrupt in your subtitle. Mm-hmm. Was he corrupt, and in what sense was he corrupt?
Yes, he absolutely was corrupt. Look, we can big picture, it's the two things I said, that he was willing to bend the truth, which is lesson number one that you're taught as a prosecutor, and I talk in the book about this, is you never, forget about lie, you never bend the truth, you never fudge the truth, you never exaggerate, you never shade things. He did it over and over again. And second of all, he injected politics into everything he did. I mean, start with the Mueller report, right? I view Bill Barr's lying to the public about the Mueller report as Bill Barr's original sin. And just to remind us, Bill Barr got the Mueller report before anybody else. He got it on a Friday. And 2 days later on a Sunday, Bill Barr somehow managed to digest this entire 448-page report and declare essentially Donald Trump free and clear. Now, it turned out that Bill Barr's recitation of and summary of the bottom line of what was in the Mueller's report was wildly inaccurate. And we know that because Robert Mueller came out and said that to Bill Barr, and federal judges found that Bill Barr had mischaracterized the report. The thing is, though, and I talk about this in the book, not only did Barr mischaracterize the Mueller report, he was really devious the way he sort of choreographed it, because it took Bill Barr, he held on to that report for nearly a month, for 27 days. We had Bill Barr's summary of it. We learned later, false summary of it, but we did not have the actual report to cross-check it for 27 days. And during that time, public opinion sort of calcified around Bill Barr's initial take. And as a result, by the time it actually came out, most people had already sort of drawn their conclusions and gone about their business. So I think Bill Barr really bailed Donald Trump out on the Mueller report.
So by the time authorities and the facts called out Bill Barr on his misrepresentation of the Mueller report, the report was really blunted, and
Yeah.
the public didn't understand its true significance.
Yeah, we all understand the power of first impressions. You're taught that as a child, right?
You don't have a second
Here,
chance to make a first impression.
exactly. And here, Bill Barr gave us his first impression without giving us the Mueller report. And then that first impression was the only thing on the playing field for nearly a month. So yeah, I think that's true. And here's just another detail that we sort of unearthed or remembered in the book. There was a moment when Bill Barr testified in front of Congress, when he had already seen the Mueller report. He had already released his untrue summary of it, but we, the public, had not yet seen it. And one member of Congress, a representative from Pennsylvania, asked Barr, has anybody on Mueller's team expressed to you displeasure with the way you've represented the report? Has anyone on Mueller's team said that you've inaccurately sort of summarized the report? And Bill Barr leaned right into the microphone and said, no. Now, a couple of weeks later, it comes out that Robert Mueller actually did write this letter to Bill Barr where he said, you've misstated the substance and conclusions and findings of my report. So later, Barr's in front of Congress and they say, how did you lie to us about that? We asked you if anyone on Mueller's team had said anything to you. You had that letter. We didn't know it at the time. Now we know it. And you said no. And you know what Bill Barr's response was? It was a whole bunch of sort of word salad, but he ended up saying, well, I don't consider Robert Mueller to be a member of Robert Mueller's team. And the letter was from Robert Mueller. I mean, at a certain point, we're entitled to say, give me a break. Like, that's just, you wouldn't accept that explanation from your 12-year-old child. I don't accept it from the Attorney General.
Elie, that's part of your the basis for your conclusion in the book that Barr was a dishonest, partisan opportunist, a habitual dissembler, corrupt. But just to push you, when he was appointed, you said on CNN, what you want is somebody who's qualified, who's serious, and who's respected. And by all accounts, William Barr is all of these things. Well, were you wrong?
I was. And I asked the producer at CNN to go back and pull that clip because, as I say in the book, a lot of people who had been critical of the Trump administration and Jeff Sessions, the prior Attorney General, were initially positive about Bill Barr's nomination. And I quote some other sort of well-known commentators, and I quote myself, because I said that exact thing you just said, Jim. I happened to be on set the day his name was announced, and I knew who he was because he had been Attorney General in the past. In the 1990s, he's actually one of two people ever to be Attorney General twice. And exactly what I said, I put that in the book. I said, he's serious and he seems like a good pick. The thing is, a day or two later, it emerged that Bill Barr had written what we call the audition memo. In this memo, which Bill Barr claimed he just wrote, just for penny for your thoughts, nobody asked him to do it, and sent into the Justice Department, Bill Barr opined that Robert Mueller's investigation was, and I quote, fatally misconceived. Fatal, meaning it's dead. Now, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh boy, okay. A, he's already prejudged this report. B, he's auditioning for this job. You don't write a memo like that and send it in unless you want that job. C, this is going to be music to Donald Trump's ears because Donald Trump famously or infamously would say, where's my Cohn? Where's my fixer? Bill Barr's telling him now, a couple months before it's obvious the AG's job is going to come open. He's telling Donald Trump, I'll kill this investigation for you. Fatally misconceived. And guess what Bill Barr did? Exactly what he advertised. He convoluted around the facts and the law and came up with this way to kill it. So to me, that was the first indicator that we had a problem on our hands.
Well, Roy Cohn had been Trump's lawyer for over a decade. He was eventually disbarred just weeks before he died. But Roy Cohn was Trump's hatchet man. And when he said, where's my Roy Cohn, did Bill Barr prove to be Trump's Roy Cohn?
I think he did. And not just on the Mueller report, but on various other instances when, for example, Bill Barr interceded in really unprecedented fashion to undermine his own prosecutors on the Roger Stone case, on the Michael Flynn case, when he tried to cover up the Ukraine scandal, when he echoed Donald Trump's lies about election fraud. And Jim, it's an interesting comparison between the people, Roy Cohn and Bill Barr, because one of my concepts here is Bill Barr gets away with and got away with a lot largely for superficial reasons because of his appearance and his demeanor, right? If you think of some of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters, you think of people like Roy Cohn, very aggressive, very angry, very in your face, Rudy Giuliani, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, all these guys, right? They're very loud, they're very aggressive, they're very bellicose. Bill Barr did not present himself that way. He always wore a suit and was very tidy and was, if anything, was soft-spoken, and he sort of had the imprimatur of the Justice Department. So he didn't emerge as a really spectacular Trump enabler. But if you look at the actual actions and the power that Bill Barr wielded as Attorney General, I think what he did was way more damaging than any of those people in terms of bending reality and bending the law to serve Donald Trump.
You talk in the book about Barr's first tour as Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. And of course, what you don't mention is he was Attorney General at the time of the Ruby Ridge Massacre. And at that time, he denied knowing anything about it, although the Washington Post was able to document through telephone calls his involvement in the whole episode. So there was a lot about his background that was quite murky, quite apart from the audition memo.
Yeah, there were signs there. The other major scandal of the Bush administration was the Iran-Contra scandal, where Bill Barr pushed for pardons for people who were involved in that, including Caspar Weinberger, the former defense secretary, who many believed was in position to implicate the then former president and vice president if he decided to cooperate, if his prosecution followed through. And that turned out to be a bit of foreshadowing, I think, for what Bill Barr would do a quarter century later in his second term as AG. Okay,
now you argue in the book that Barr breached the Prosecutors Code. Now, what is the Prosecutors Code? Can I find a book and look it up, and it's something that says Prosecutors Code and read all about it?
Right. So the Prosecutors Code is not written, not to be overly mystical about it, but when you're a prosecutor, there are plenty of written codes you are given. You are given the statutes, you are given the rule book, you are given the sentencing guidelines, you are given what we call the Justice Manual, which tells you things you can and cannot do as a federal prosecutor. The Prosecutors Code, I argue, is really a set of norms, ethics, and principles that you can only learn by actually being a prosecutor. And this is why I tell a lot of the sort of war stories and trial stories that I tell in the book, because my argument is there are certain things about the job of being a prosecutor that you can only properly learn and internalize and appreciate if you've done the job, if you've been in the trenches, if you've gone through trials, if you've had to sit with victims and defendants, if you've had judges yelling at you, if you've had defense lawyers sort of checking everything you say, if you've been in the heat of battle. And one of my critiques of Bill Barr, not the only one, but one of my critiques is he never did that. Even though he was AG twice, the man never tried a case as a prosecutor in his life to this point. And as a result, he sort of didn't fully understand or didn't fully care about the Prosecutors Code, but it's really basic concepts. For example, like I said, you never lie, you never play politics, you never stab your colleagues in the back, which is something Bill Barr did many times over. If you're wrong, acknowledge it, own up, and do your best to fix it. If there's a fact you don't like or that's inconvenient, you have to put it out there and deal with it. If you've already expressed an opinion on a case or have some sort of conflict of interest, you have to take yourself off that case. There's a handful of sort of fundamental precepts that I lay out that I argue these are the Prosecutors Code that Bill Barr broke over and over again.
Well, of course, it's not irrelevant to have had experience as a line prosecutor if you want to become the Attorney General of the United States. But we've had a number of attorneys general who had no experience as a line prosecutor, even great iconic attorneys general like Robert Jackson,
right.
Even Robert Kennedy, Griffin Bell. None of them were line prosecutors.
So I don't argue that having experience or not having line experience is dispositive. It's, if you have it, you're going to be good. If you don't, you're going to be bad. There are counterexamples. I argue that that was one major shortcoming that Bill Barr never managed to overcome for a couple reasons. One, unlike many or all of the attorney generals that you just named, all the top people around him also had no trial experience, right? That doesn't apply to some of those other folks. His deputy AG, his associate AG, the head of his criminal division had never tried a criminal case. So you start with that. And second of all, Bill Barr has deep personality flaws. He acted poorly in the job. So I think he started from a bit of a handicapped position by not having prior experience. And I think that lack of experience absolutely colored what he did and harmed his performance. But it goes beyond that. I mean, those other folks weren't liars the way Bill Barr is. Those other folks weren't willing to overtly play politics the way that Bill Barr was. So it's really a combination of factors.
A lot of the problem emanates from who the president was from 2017 to 2021. Had it been George H.W. Bush, even with Barr in there, you wouldn't have had, I would argue, the same type of problems, the politicization of the Justice Department that you had under Trump. I mean, no prior president had ever attempted to corrupt the Justice Department in this manner. And if the president tries, the president appointed Barr had the power to fire him. So what is poor Barr supposed to do?
I think I agree with you. Look, Donald Trump has zero regard or respect for the traditional wall of separation that exists and must exist, I argue, between the White House and DOJ. However, let's keep in mind, Bill Barr knew full well what he was getting into, right? He had already seen 2 years of the Trump administration, Trump berating Jeff Sessions and Whitaker and trying to interject himself, tweeting daily about these cases. So it wasn't as if Bill Barr got caught by surprise. He auditioned for this position. He accepted this position. He knew what he was accepting when he took this position. Let's start with that. And then he comes in and he does nothing to stand up to the president.
Toward the end, he did lament.
Toward the end, yes.
Your tweets are driving me nuts. I can't do my job.
Yeah, and then you know what happened? Right, that was one moment when Bill Barr sort of took a stand and said, "Enough with these tweets. You're making it impossible to do my job." The president then tweeted right in Barr's face and said, "Oh, I'll tweet whenever I want." And you know what Bill Barr did? Absolutely nothing. He went right back to same old pattern. So it was good talk by Barr, unaccompanied by action.
Where is the Attorney General's duty supposed to lie? Is it to the public? Is it to the Constitution? Is it to the president? Is the law? These are all abstractions. I mean, you're practicing law. The client tells you that he or she wants you to take a certain course. You're very much influenced by that.
So the client, so to speak, is the people of the United States. Now, as you said, that can sort of mean different things. I do draw an important distinction in the book between policy matters and prosecutorial matters. I don't have any problem with any attorney general, past, present, Republican or Democrat, implementing the policy preferences of a president. Some presidents say, oh, we're going to be more aggressive on police reform. We're going to be more aggressive on opiates coming into the country. What have you.
Or voting rights.
Voting rights, exactly. That's totally fair play. Where I draw the line that Bill Barr and Donald Trump crossed is the president inserting himself into prosecutorial functions of DOJ, or the AG sort of inserting himself on the president's behalf into the prosecutorial function. And that gets back to Bill Barr's, I think, false intervention in the Mueller case. I think Bill Barr's unprecedented and obviously political intervention in the Roger Stone and Michael Flynn cases. I don't think there's any way to justify that, even though Barr tried to say it had nothing to do with politics. It just so happened these two cases, out of 80,000 cases DOJ charges every year, these two happen to be the ones where he came in and undermined his own prosecutors. So I think that's the line that was crossed between the policy function of DOJ and the prosecutorial function of DOJ.
But in the garden variety case, and I hate to suggest that when you were a federal prosecutor, you were prosecuting garden variety cases, but many of them involve the mafia, as you relate in the book, and it's really fascinating to read about your encounters with the mafia, professional encounters with the mafia. But in none of those cases did it involve the president of the United States. And isn't it legitimate for the attorney general to become personally involved in high-profile cases of tremendous public interest involving the accountability of the president?
Right, and I think the answer there is no. I think look, the cases
you got to stand back and leave that to line prosecutors.
Yeah, well, look, I think I don't think you have to necessarily step out of it. But I think when you see this pattern from the attorney general of interjecting himself into politically charged cases over and over again, and they always come out the same way, and you twist the law you distort the facts to get there, then yes, I think we're entitled to conclude that that was political and that there were bad motivations in play there. I'm not saying the attorney general has no role to play in high profile cases. It's absolutely appropriate. However, don't lie to us about those cases as he did in Mueller, and don't try to tell us that these weren't political when they're obviously political, as with Stone, as with Flynn, when he's undermining his own prosecutors who've already been fully vetted in DOJ, remember, by the time Bill Barr steps in and sort of makes these unprecedented interventions. So I'm not arguing that the AG should run away from his job and never touch anything that touches on the president. But I think we are entitled as rational human beings in the public when we see the same pattern of Bill Barr stepping in, oftentimes lying, oftentimes twisting the law, losing constantly in court, by the way, taking unprecedented steps to undermine his own prosecutors. Yeah, I think we are entitled to conclude that that's politically driven and that's corrupt.
Well, on Roger Stone, the line prosecutors recommended 8 to 9 years as the sentence. It was vetted, it was approved up and down the line. But it struck you as a harsh recommendation. It struck the sentencing judge as a harsh recommendation. Barr didn't recommend any specific sentence. He just said that it was too harsh. I mean, was that corrupt?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. It was easy to see that the judge was going to go lower than this. I publicly predicted that the judge would go lower than what the prosecutors wanted. Two problems with this, though. Number one, those prosecutors had already gone through the entire Justice Department approval process that they were required to. They had authority from their U.S. attorney. Bill Barr did not choose to get involved. Then they come out publicly, as they should have done, as they were authorized to do, with the DOJ recommendation. And then Barr cuts the knees out from under them. The second thing was Bill Barr had the nerve to try to tell us that his intervention in the Roger Stone case, which, by the way, is the only time he did that in office out of tens of thousands of cases, and the Michael Flynn case, when he tried to throw out the conviction of Michael Flynn. Both guys, what do they have in common, Roger Stone and Michael Flynn? They're both Trump cronies, and they both were in position to turn on him if they flipped to potentially harm the president. Bill Barr had the nerve to try to tell us that had nothing to do with politics, that had nothing to do with President Trump. These were just the cases that happened to filter across my desk. I mean, what are the mathematical odds of that? That the two cases where Bill Barr would take these unprecedented steps, like I said before, let's do the math on this. 80,000 cases a year. Is Bill Barr intervening in any other cases other than these two? No. What are the odds that that's just happenstance? Those it had nothing to do with politics. Those are just the cases that happened to filter across his desk.
Okay, let's compare and contrast Barr with the incumbent, Merrick Garland. You have the E. Jean Carroll case.
Yeah.
Easy to fault Barr for moving to substitute the United States for Donald Trump in a private libel action and pending in a state court, removing it to the federal court. And the motion to substitute was denied by a distinguished federal judge. And then in comes Merrick Garland. And instead of just letting the thing ride, so the action could go forward, he takes an appeal to the Second Circuit, which is pending, in which he claims that the United States can legitimately be substituted for the president when the president is making statements that are libelous in a totally private matter about a rape that allegedly occurred decades before.
I think that was a misstep by Merrick Garland there. I argue in the book that, and I said publicly before Judge Kaplan ruled, I said, this is outrageous. Judge Kaplan thankfully agreed with me, or not necessarily agreed with me, but came down in the same position. Now, I will say this, however, for what one thing Merrick Garland has done better than Bill Barr is Merrick Garland and Joe Biden clearly respect the wall of separation between DOJ and the White House when it comes to criminal matters. Both sides have said, Joe Biden has said, it is not my job to get involved in their prosecutorial function. And there was a good example of this recently, Jim, when on the day when DOJ executed search warrants on Rudy Giuliani, that was a huge story. There was reporting later that the White House was angry because the White House, that was the night of Joe Biden's first joint address to Congress. And the White House felt like DOJ had sort of taken a lot of the media attention by doing the search warrant that day. And when I saw that story, I thought, good, that's how it should be. DOJ should never be thinking about how does this impact the president's thing tonight or the president's political impetus of the moment. So I do give Merrick Garland credit for that.
I have a question for you,
Yes.
Elie Honig, and that is, did Bill Barr do lasting damage to the structure of the Justice Department?
He did. When I first started as a young federal prosecutor, I was told, I was given this speech several times, when you stand up in court and say, Elie Honig representing the United States for the Justice Department, people will believe you. However, it's very easy to lose that trust. So don't blow it. That's essentially the lesson I was given. And I do think people now trust the Justice Department less because we've just been through 2 years where Bill Barr has twisted facts, twisted law. And I think now that credibility that DOJ has carried for a long time has been severely damaged. Now, it will come back because let's remember the vast majority, 99% of people at DOJ are career prosecutors, career investigators, people who don't do politics either way. Ultimately, their work is what prevails. But yeah, I do think there is and will be long-term damage to the Justice Department, but I also have faith that DOJ will recover.
Thank you for coming by, and thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. This has been just marvelous. I'm Jim Zirin. Take care, be well, and all the best.